In the small, fog-kissed town of Maple Hollow, nestled between whispering woods and winding roads, a golden-brown puppy was born during one of the worst thunderstorms the region had seen in years. Rain lashed the windows of the old veterinary clinic as thunder rumbled low, like a warning from something ancient. Inside, Dr. Penelope Rourke leaned over a trembling shepherd mix, helping to deliver the final pup in the litter. The mother dog whimpered, and with one last push, out came the runt, smaller than the others, soaked and motionless. Penelope scooped him up gently, rubbing him dry with a towel. The moment her hands touched him, a chill crept up her spine. He opened his eyes, too soon, far too early for a newborn, and looked directly into hers. Not with the blurred innocence of a puppy, but with a gaze so deep, so unsettlingly aware, it rooted her in place. Without thinking, she whispered, "Jonathan." She didn't know where the name came from. It wasn't on any list. It wasn't inspired by anyone she knew. It simply rose out of her like a memory, like she was naming someone she had once lost. Her assistant stared at her. "Jonathan." Penelope nodded slowly. The room fell silent. The other puppies wriggled blindly, but this one sat still, as if he was listening, as if he'd been waiting, not to be born, but to return. No one in that room ever forgot the look in his eyes. Jonathan was adopted 6 weeks later by Claire Rowen, a reserved, soft-spoken woman in her early 50s who taught piano from her ivy-covered cottage on the edge of town. Widowed young and childless by choice, Claire had long grown used to silence, comfortable in the rhythm of her days spent between old sheet music, steaming cups of tea, and echoing piano notes. She hadn't planned on adopting a dog that day. She'd only visited the shelter at the suggestion of a friend. But the moment she saw him, sitting calmly apart from the others, his eyes following her with quiet recognition, something shifted deep inside her. She knelt. He didn't bark or wag his tail. He simply leaned into her palm like he'd been waiting. From the moment she brought him home, it became clear Jonathan was unlike any puppy she'd known. He never chewed on shoes or chased his tail. He never barked at birds or shadows. He watched her with an intensity that felt human. When she spoke, he listened, not with alert ears, but with comprehension. "Fetch my keys," she said once absent-mindedly, and he did. "Turn off the light," she joked, and with his nose, he flipped the switch. "Close the door," she murmured, and he pushed it shut with a gentle nudge. She began to wonder, was she teaching him, or was he remembering? Living with him felt less like raising a dog, and more like sharing space with a soul that had walked this world before. As Jonathan grew older, so did a quiet, unnerving sense that he didn't quite belong in the world of ordinary dogs. While other pups tugged on leashes, lunged at squirrels, or barked at doorbells, Jonathan remained composed. He refused to chase balls or chew toys, no matter how many Claire tried to tempt him with. He showed no interest in other dogs at the park, and strangers on walks were met with a dignified nod of the head. Never fear, never excitement. Children, enchanted by his noble posture and thoughtful eyes, affectionately called him Sir Jonathan. He tolerated their presence with the patience of a schoolteacher, never snarling or pulling away, but never engaging in play. He simply observed. And always in the evenings he claimed the same spot in Claire's house, the old burgundy velvet armchair by the living room window. There, he would sit for hours in silence, watching the wind move through the willow tree outside, as if waiting for someone. One rainy night, Claire sat at her piano and began playing Clair de Lune, letting the melody fill the house like a lullaby. Jonathan slowly climbed into his chair, curled his paws beneath him, and closed his eyes. As the final notes drifted into stillness, Claire turned to look at him and froze. A single tear had slid down his cheek, not from pain, not from sleep, but from something deeper. She felt it in her chest like a whisper. That wasn't a dog's grief. It was the sorrow of someone remembering something long lost. Not long after the tearful night of Debussy, Claire's dreams began to change. At first, they were fleeting, a flicker of someone standing beneath the willow, the sound of turning pages, the scent of old books. But as the weeks passed, they grew clearer. In every dream, there was a man in a long gray coat, always sitting beneath the willow tree, just beyond her window. He never spoke. He never turned his face toward her. He sat quietly, reading a weathered leather-bound book, legs crossed in the autumn leaves. And always, without fail, Jonathan was by his side, not as a puppy, but as a fully grown dog, calm and alert, his eyes full of knowing. The setting was familiar, too familiar. The tree outside her home, the same old velvet chair, even the faint sound of piano music playing in the background. Claire woke each morning with a strange ache in her chest, like remembering something she never lived. One gray morning, as rain tapped softly on the roof, she sat on the floor with Jonathan beside her, stroking his fur. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Were you someone?" She felt foolish even saying it out loud. But Jonathan didn't blink. He didn't tilt his head or react like a dog would. Instead, he looked at her, deeply, directly, and slowly lifted his paw, placing it gently over her heart. Her breath caught. In that moment, Claire didn't feel like she was looking at a dog. She felt like she was looking into the eyes of a soul who had once known her and never truly left. The dreams wouldn't leave her. Each night, Claire would wake with fragments of melodies and fleeting images lingering in her mind. Pages turning. Piano notes echoing through trees. The man in the gray coat who never showed his face. Something inside her insisted these weren't just dreams, but memories buried somewhere deeper than thought. One afternoon, driven by a sudden, inexplicable urgency, she climbed up into the dusty attic she hadn't visited in years. Cobwebs clung to old furniture and forgotten trunks. She sifted through boxes of sheet music and faded letters until her hand brushed against a small, weathered wooden chest tucked beneath an old quilt. Inside it, wrapped in yellowed tissue, was a photograph. It showed a young man standing beside a piano, her piano, the same ivory keys, the same curved mahogany legs. The velvet chair was in the background, and beyond the window, the unmistakable silhouette of the willow tree. She stared at the photo in disbelief. On the back, in faded ink, were 5 simple words. J.R. Home, finally. Claire's heart pounded. Her vision blurred. J.R.? Jonathan Rowen? Her last name. The name she'd never thought twice about. Her hands trembled as she whispered aloud, "Is it you?" She looked over at Jonathan, lying silently at the foot of the attic stairs. He wasn't wagging his tail or cocking his head. He simply stared at her, solemn and still, as if he had been waiting for her to find that piece of the past and accept what her heart already knew. He had come home. Not long after she found the photograph, Claire's health began to decline. It started subtly: missed appointments, misplaced sheet music, keys left in the refrigerator. At first, she brushed it off as forgetfulness, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. A visit to the neurologist confirmed what she feared most: early-onset dementia. The words fell heavy in the air, but Jonathan's presence remained unwavering. While the world around her dimmed and details slipped through the cracks of her mind like water through cupped hands, Jonathan became her anchor. He nudged her toward the kitchen when she forgot to eat. He pawed at the drawer where she kept her medication. When she stared blankly at the piano keys, unsure of their meaning, he'd place his head gently on her lap, reminding her, guiding her. And when speech became difficult, she turned to humming. Always Debussy. Always Clair de Lune. Jonathan would sit close, eyes closed, listening not with ears, but with a heart that seemed to remember. He didn't just comfort her, he guarded her, with a devotion that surpassed instinct. It was as if he had returned not just to be near her, but to protect her from being lost again. One night, as the house lay silent under a moonless sky, Claire collapsed near the piano bench. Her breathing slowed, her body still. For the first time in his life, Jonathan howled, a long, mournful cry that carried through the trees and into the hearts of all who heard it. A sound not of fear, but of sorrow. Claire passed away on a quiet winter morning, her final breath a whisper lost beneath the soft hum of wind pressing against the windows. Snow had fallen gently overnight, blanketing Maple Hollow in a hushed white stillness. Inside her home, everything was calm. The fireplace had long since gone cold, the piano untouched for days. But Claire lay in her bed, wrapped in her favorite knitted blanket, her expression peaceful, almost as if she'd simply drifted into a sweeter dream. At her side, Jonathan was curled tightly against her, his head resting just above her heart. He didn't stir when the hospice nurse arrived. He didn't move when Claire's niece entered the house later that afternoon. The silence was uncanny. But when they entered the bedroom, he was gone. There were no signs of an open door, no window left ajar. The freshly fallen snow outside was untouched, no paw prints, no trails. Yet Claire's bed bore only a soft indentation where he had been, and, placed gently on her pillow, the same faded photograph she had discovered weeks before. The young man beside the piano, with J.R. home, finally still etched on the back. The room carried a lingering scent, not of fur or dog, but of aged piano wood and old books. Her niece whispered his name, but no answer came. Jonathan had vanished as quietly and mysteriously as he had entered her life. Some say he simply slipped out into the woods. Others believe he had never truly been just a dog, and once his purpose was fulfilled, he returned to wherever he had come from. Even now, years after Claire's passing, stories still drift through Maple Hollow like falling leaves on a slow breeze. Travelers passing through the sleepy town, especially during quiet, rainy afternoons, sometimes report seeing a lone golden-brown dog sitting beneath the wide, weeping limbs of the old willow tree near the edge of the Rowen property. He doesn't bark or run when approached. He simply sits there still and serene, as if waiting. Locals say if you approach him gently and sit beside him without fear, he'll remain. And if you hum even a few notes of Clair de Lune, something extraordinary happens. He'll slowly lower his head onto your lap and close his eyes, as if remembering something only he can truly recall. No one knows for sure where he came from, or how he continues to appear with no tracks, no aging, no explanation. They call him the dog with a human name. Some say he's a ghost. Others whisper he's an angel, a guardian spirit, or even the reincarnation of a man long gone. But those who've met him all agree, Jonathan wasn't just a pet. He was a story in the shape of a dog, a mystery woven from love, grief, and music, a soul who came back not to be understood, but to be felt. And on rainy days in Maple Hollow, beneath that willow tree, some hearts still find peace and silence beside him, as if love, in its purest form, never really goes away. It simply returns when it's needed most.